Are the largest online news network in the world. They have done something that I'm sure in the early days people were saying, what are you guys doing? You're wasting your time with this TYT. I remember doing TYT as a, fill-in host. I think, they had at that time 3 people. It was Jank, I think Ben Mankiewicz, and they had, we'll bring on Jayar and he'll tell us, but, and I remember it was in like this half-vacant building, like in the Mid-Wilshire district of Los Angeles, next to a McDonald's. You park on the McDonald's and you'd, scoot over to, all these empty offices. It looked like a bombed-out building. And then there was TYT. They were just kind of in their growth period. And it's just extremely exciting to see what's happened and how the media landscape has changed and how there are really now a bunch of TYTs coming up, independent media. This show will be a really tiny example of one. But a guy who's been here, been there, I should say, from the very beginning, a guy who's been at TYT since it all started is our guest now. How about it for Jayar Jackson, everybody?
What's going on, Mark?
Nice
Thompson.
to see you.
How you doing, brother?
It's great to see you, man. Everything's good here. I mean, this is... we are witnessing history, and it's bad history, but there's a lot to get to. But before I get to all of that, take me through the TYT beats just quickly. It is true what I was saying that, in the beginning, it was just, it felt cobbled together. You had like a handful of dedicated people, yourself among them, and then this space in Mid-Wilshire, Los Angeles, and it was Jank, it was Ben, it was there was a woman on the show at that time.
You almost got it. Yeah, I trust you, Mark. I trust you. Jill Pike.
Jill Pike, that's it, right?
Jill Pike. And Jesus Godoy.
Of course, Jesus.
Yeah, Jesus and I were both. He came in a little bit before I did. We were like the behind the other side of the window guys. We would play random sounds of Jank.
And Dave Kohler was there too.
Kohler.
Yeah,
absolutely. So that was like the original crew in a way. I was the last of the original crew, of course. Also Michael Schur. I didn't know he had known them that well until months or ever so later when I first met him. And also Dave wasn't specifically there when I started. He was off in Bolivia or Belgium. I can't remember where he went.
Right. Some Spanish speaking nation is that right?
Yeah, so it must have been Bolivia.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I live in America. I'm in this country where we don't know anything about the rest of the world.
Yeah, right. Well, we're so big and powerful, we don't need to. Yeah. But the growth has been remarkable at TYT. And then they've spun off shows, and they went through their period during which there was outside investment. Then they got rid of all those outside investors and kind of returned to their mission statement. And Jank is controversial, and, I mentioned TYT, and there are people who are TYT lovers, there are people who are TYT haters, and there are people who don't know TYT still. But I think they are truth tellers to the point that you can disagree. And I think even the TYTers, we don't all agree on stuff. I mean, when I go down there, I'm Jank and I can go round and around on stuff,
Yeah, it's always kind of been that way, hasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
There's an infamous moment with Jank and Michael Schur, who I just mentioned, and it was about the Iraq War. So as far as the I'm aging how old we all are, but it was around 2002, 2003 when all that came together, and Jank was screaming about this USA Today article that said Bush says something is safer, and I can't remember the line right now, but Michael was this calm Michael Schur as he always is. And he's like, well, Jank, it's what it was said. It was like very slow and subdued, and Jank is losing his mind.
Yeah. Well, that's Jank's coin of the realm, and without angry Jank going off. I mean, it's just, it's kind of what he does. But yeah, I can say that I've never been asked to comment or don't say this or don't comment on that ever. And so I always, when I hear people say they wouldn't let me say this, wouldn't let me say that, I think that because there's a lot of kind of rap battle noise between shows, I find, and TYT is sort of toward the top. And so they take a lot of incoming fire. I think they always fire at those who have, who've done well. And I think that it's just total BS. I know it's BS. They don't ask you to avoid saying anything at all.
Yeah, I mean, and there'll be disagreements. I mean, all the way up until today, these, not today specifically, but these days, There's plenty of disagreements on the approach of the Democratic Party and how things are supposed to go, and establishment versus progressives, and ultra progressives versus, whoever else these labels are that I don't really keep up with. I still can't tell you the difference specifically between a liberal and a progressive. I'd like to exchange those words and those terms all the time. So I was like, wait, a leftist or progressive, or is it a liberal? I don't know, but maybe I've angered folks by misinterpreting the correct level of progressive or Democrat or leftist or
well,
leftist.
we've weaponized some of those terms. Like when you say leftist, it means something different to me than, well, my mom is on the left. You know what I mean? Like, but she's not a leftist, because leftist sounds radical.
It totally does, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't it?
Sounds Antifa-like. You know what I mean? So I don't know. But I think that's important, because the labeling and the weaponization of labels is something that is being done very effectively, I think, by the 100%. Right. They talk about the woke left, so they'll take a term and they'll add another term to it, and now that hyphenate is really damaging in a conversation or argument.
Yeah, it's as simple as even calling folks a Democrat Party. And then, no lie, this was what the thought is, make sure you press the rat part, so that in people's heads they think Democrats are rats. God. So they won't say Democratic leader, it's like the Democrat leader, and they push rat. No lie, it's the way it's supposed to change people's energy. And look at where we are today. Look, many conservatives or Republicans may complain about Donald Trump and his rhetoric and the things he says, but they still support him. Again, many, not all, but they'll hear terms. I mean, he started his entire political career talking about other folks and calling them names and making a generalization about who they are and what they're about. So that wasn't brand new. He just used it to a higher degree and consistently and nonstop, and took off the veil. Like, there was always dog whistles. He doesn't know what a dog whistle is. He just whistles, bro. He just throws it out there. So it's always kind of been there. He just exploited it for the full real energy is behind a division and hatred for the other that we kind of built this country on. Let's keep it real. I mean, people don't like to hear that.
Katie Lynch says, I loved it when TYT sent reporters to Trump rallies and asked why attendees liked Trump. They always, quote, liked his policies, but could never specify one. It was an extraordinary phenomenon, and that's why I think you've seen something that can be reduced to a cult of personality. I mean, I think that is what you're seeing. I believe that Trump is a once-in-a-generation political figure. We can call him vacuous, which I do. We can call him, playing the theater of being president, which I do. But I also see the way he effectively communicates the things that he knows will dominate the news cycle and win over support. He is, from that standpoint, he is genius. And I'm sorry, whenever I say anything nice about Trump, people jump on me, but I
don't see that as nice.
Yeah, I mean,
honestly, I've said it this way. When there was the debate over whether or not Elon Musk is throwing out Nazi salutes and all that stuff, I made sure that I pointed out, and also when General John Kelly called Donald Trump a fascist, along with I believe 2 other generals, I was like, well, you don't have to be mad at me for repeating what someone else said explicitly. Someone who agrees with him, maybe politically on many points. They're just talking about his character and who he is. So when you call Donald Trump a genius for using that same kind of energy of division and wordplay and anger, let's keep it real, to get people on his side, as you talked about the cult of personality, it doesn't matter anymore what he's saying. It just matters that he's saying it, because now they have a collective a togetherness of having an opposition to this group or this group of people or multiple groups of people that aren't them. So when you call him genius for using that, sure, it's genius, but it's not positive. There's evil geniuses. I wouldn't call them that, but so people can take the term whichever way they want, positive or negatively. But for someone to exploit, I guess, our original sin of division and hatred and push for the other and weaponize it to then get enough people who agree with that same hatred and abuse and dismissal and division of the other, I mean, I guess it's genius, but it doesn't mean that it's good. So I don't mind that you call him a genius. It's just that the folks that follow him don't see. I was watching that last clip you were just playing when he was talking to Brett Baer. I used to sell cars. By the way, during the time I still started with TYT, this is after college. Sold cars for about a month. Board Ford in Whittier, California. And It was
I know I'm laughing. It's perfectly legitimate work. I guess I just didn't see you in a showroom
no,
originally.
it wasn't
All right.
legitimate work. I got screamed at for letting a guy leave. Yeah. So it was the worst job. So you hear a used car salesman every time he speaks. It's so easy to tell when someone's dodging the question and then just rambling. He has no specifics in anything that he says. So the one thing I generally disagree with people on is when they say, "Yo, he knows how to convince people of his point or getting across." No, he doesn't. He just keeps talking until you forgot what he was supposed to be talking about. He avoided the question blatantly. And then no one comes back and says, so Mr. President, the question actually was, why do you trust Elon Musk? It wasn't, Elon Musk is going to go clean up the Department of Education next. Then he's going to the Department of Defense. It's, well, considering Elon Musk's actual background that you refuse to talk about, why do you trust him? What motivation does he have to take all this money and then give it to who? What systems are in place? I was just talking about this yesterday with John Iadarola. What systems are in place that have you guys believing that after he saves these billions and trillions of dollars, that they're somehow coming back to you? How are you benefiting from all this money that he claims he just found is caught up in all this corruption? You know how one way he could probably deliver that money back to you is through tax cuts for people that aren't ultra wealthy, which they're about to do, or maybe through these things that we call in America government programs, entitlements. The things that they're cutting,
the very things they're taking out. Yeah, it
doesn't make any sense.
And that interview to which you referred, the bear thing, was just a back rub. I mean, that was just like a human mic stand interview. But you're right. Even the tepid questions he couldn't answer. Chris Johnson says, no, genius is not difficult to con ignorance. Well, I get it. Maybe genius overstates it, but he's definitely locked into the American psyche, and he locked into the American psyche across the board. That wasn't just a third of America that voted for him. Mm-hmm. It was something of a plurality. I mean, and you had minority groups that you would think, I mean, directly negatively affected by so much Trump policy, like the Latinos, and they came out and voted for him.
You know why? Like he crossed multiple levels. The one thing is division, and also the fear of the other. The other can be LGBTQ plus. It can be Black folks. It can be Latinos. It can be Asians. It can be women. It can be the disabled. He's crossed that line also after that horrific DC airplane crash, because now he's blaming the disabled for the opening up of programs. I had a friend who posted about the DEI slur that they've turned it into now. But if you force people, or if they actually say the full words, or actually what the acronym stands for, they'd have to explicitly say, yo, I'm against diversity. You know, I'm against inclusion, and equity. I'm against all these things. So then the next question has to be, why are you against inclusion? Who are you trying to exclude in the United States of America while you talk about unity? Why are you against diversity? Which diverse group of people do you think aren't worth it? You eventually have to promote your supremacy, your issues with your superiority complex with the rest of us. And that's not always sound very good.
The pushback on that, of course, is this. It's not that I don't welcome. I mean, they wouldn't say this, because he's really about, I'm only recognizing two sexes, and I'm only recognizing, I mean, they are gone aggressively against any kind of, shall we say, agenda or priorities associated with the LGBTQ plus community, or with minority rights, et cetera. But the academic argument is, it's not that I don't feel that those people deserve a place at the table. I just don't feel that all our policies should be hijacked by those values. And now you're in a wrestling match academically about how big a priority these issues should be. But what they found was, don't get into the wrestling match, just state it. This woman, Kamala Harris, wants your tax dollars to pay for these trans operations for illegal immigrants who are now in prison. That 1 30-second spot was a wrecking ball, didn't you think?
Because that, and again, and that's how it crosses over multiple people. So sure, there's Black folks that are be like, oh my God, trans rights. There's Asian folks, there's Latino folks. They're like, oh my God, trans rights. And then if folks maybe who are okay with that, then the next attack is on Latinos. Can you believe what they're doing to our country? They're taking our jobs and they're just, they're living high off the hog. Again, none of it has to be true, just as long as it triggers something in whatever person it appeals to. So it gives also the cover of, this isn't white supremacy, because obviously it's not just white folks who agree with it. Well, you're not only attacking racial minorities, you're attacking other folks that racial minorities, some segments of those populations, also dislike. Of course, there's issues within the Black community. There are many folks who have issues with LGBTQ plus community, even though plenty of Black folks fall within that community. I mean, it's the basis for a lot of times, the upbringing of Baptist Christianity within the Black community, because it was preached in our churches. I grew up in one of them, where, oh my God, there's a fear for gay folks. And oh my God, it's gone further. Now they're not just gay, they're also lesbian. And then after that, oh my God, you hear this thing called trans? So it's an added layer every time of this browbeating of how afraid you must be. And of course, there's Black folks that have money, and then they want to protect their money. Yes, there's Black CEOs. Yes, there's Asian CEOs. And no matter if they've been attacked from the COVID thing that Trump did a drumbeat on every time, you know what? He had people afraid of Asian folks because they must carry the virus differently than other folks. There's so many layers to how much it was stacked.
We become this, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because it is layers, as you say. We become this populist that sort of reminds me of what they talked about for years in the Iranian street when it came to the despotism that informed Iranian politics. They had the Shah, and then they had the fall of the Shah, and then you had these religious mullahs take over, et cetera. But the street never changed. I remember reading so much about Iran, how they're filled with conspiracy theories, and they're generally ignorant. They work against actually educating that public. They want them in the is it the madrasas, or what they call the religious schools?
Right?
Yeah. And you see, I think more and more of that in this country. And the reason that everything that we're talking about now is important is because there is a need to communicate to a public that is informed by a lot of these different characteristics that we're talking about. I mean, they jumped on DEI and they waved that flag, and everybody rallied against it. I mean, it's amazing how that is washing down so positively with the American people. But it wasn't just that. Look at CC Ryder says, I'm ex-GOP. I saw the Trump normalization during 2015 on many, many Christian TV shows. She's talking about the normalization of Trump. Same for 2024, she says. And then Joe Rogan, MAGA, Chris Cuomo, Shark Tank, Kevin O'Leary, all sell Trump to the base. There was more of a normalization of Trump this time around, Jayar, than I think in 2015. Do you agree?
It did. It definitely was. So the folks who separated from the party, who are still conservatives but didn't like his approach, by the way, it was all of them at first. It really showed what political power does. Principles. They have them at first, but their principles are based on whether or not they think they can win. So at first they went, oh my God, this guy's going crazy. He's saying all this crazy stuff that, man, I believe in some of it, but we can't say that or else we'll lose. Then he won the primary and they went, wait a second, maybe he is onto something. Maybe this works. It's not a matter of whether or not it's principle based. It's just that it works. It worked. He won. After he lost in 2020 and then his mob descended upon the Capitol, they were like, oh my God, I can't believe it. Look at the day on January 6th in the halls of Congress, in the Senate and the House. Republicans were making speeches about how Donald Trump needs to make sure he owns up to this and tells his people to go back home. They came to kill us. But before the end of the week, they were on his side because they were, wait a second, that didn't stick. People are mad at me for saying that Donald Trump was a part of this whole thing. So they went right back to following him. And then, and you have your, it's like a coaching tree. You're a sports fan, Mark. So the coaching tree that starts with the legendary coach, and then he has assistant coaches under him. They learn the process, or maybe they have their own elements that they add to it. Then they get head coaching jobs, and it spreads out and it spreads out and it spreads out. Next thing you know, the guy who started the whole thing is the messiah of it, and the rest of these guys are innovators of the next stages of it. So he's had his coaching tree come out and spread the same news to more and more people. So even though everything he says they say it as well because they're thinking this might benefit me too. I might get a job coaching the Packers, So it's a similar energy.
It became a cottage industry. That's a great point, that the sort of smaller MAGAlettes went out there with all the MAGA messages in all of these smaller forms. And now with independent media having risen to the power that it has, you have all of these different platforms where you essentially can espouse the MAGA message, and it's unfettered. And you can continue to populate your timeline with a lot of that. And not to mention the dominance of mainstream media, Fox News Channel, really, with that message. And those are voters. Those are the old-time senior white voters primarily, but those are the ones. So now we get to where we are. I mean, that's how we got here. And the messaging is important because it continues to be employed. I mean, that's the reason it's so very important. And the last thing I'll just say, because what you touched on is so important, and that was the transformation will be the word I would use, from those who said Donald Trump has to own what happened on January 6th. He was the catalyst. He was the reason it happened. He's got to own it before we move on. And then, as you say, they realized that that wasn't sticking. They were paying a political price for that. And so they all came back around. Cut to everybody getting on board. The election was stolen, right? The big lie, etc. They all got their talking points. Then this election, Trump wins. And he, sure enough, goes on this revenge tour, and he's after everybody. And the rehiring of people, or the hiring of people at the highest levels of the Justice Department and the FBI, will depend on a questionnaire and answers to a questionnaire about January 6th. Was it an FBI plot, January 6th? Was it the election of 2020 legitimate, or did Trump actually win? These are questions that federal employee candidates will have to answer in the affirmative. That is to say, Trump was always he won the election. Trump was indeed the elected president, and J6 was actually an FBI plot to ensnare MAGA loyalists. Those things all have to be answered by candidates in the right way. Otherwise, they don't get the job at the FBI or the Justice Department. 100%. It's extraordinary.
Yep. And then they have to follow it up with how they then behave once they're there. I was saying this right after the election. I mean, building up to it, as I was doing videos, I also do the watch list. So all the points are carried by video evidence and proof of the people saying it. So you don't have to listen to me. I just carry it and get you guys to the next point. But the whole thing that happened in the buildup, I was like, we're trying to convince enough people to understand what our reality is in front of us, because it's a blatant lie every time. We've seen him break records for the number of lies that he tells. So in build up to election, you're trying to get people to understand it so they can vote a certain way and maybe get rid of the guy who's looking to steal all your money under the guise of populism. Once the election's over, what are we convincing anyone of anymore? It's already happened. If I convince all the MAGA voters that they were wrong, what difference does that make now? It's no longer November, bro. It is February. So now it's just a matter of a battle for our collective reality. Every day, there is another shot at what reality is. So, again, I referenced that DC airplane crash. Suddenly, he immediately comes out talking about whose fault it was. How much do we hear from conservatives every time something happens that is implicated, or it shows that it's maybe a conservative figure or maybe someone inspired by conservative beliefs, and they go, whoa, let's calm down now. I think we need to wait for the facts to come out before we make all these assumptions. Nobody said that when Donald Trump came out and made a bunch of assumptions that within 5 minutes were obviously disputed and proven to be lies. It had nothing to do with DEI. None of it. Absolutely none of it. And by the way, the things that he was upset about with the FAA happened under his first presidency. So he can't answer any of those questions. But the whole idea was to come out, recreate the reality for everyone else so that they don't accidentally fall into a reality that's not beneficial to him. So every day, we're not looking to convince you to change your mind on Donald Trump and not vote for him. That's too late. You just need to understand what's right in front of your face. And, I don't know how well that's going.
Jayar is the best part of TYT, says Jennifer B. Oh, you've got fans, yeah.
Oh, I love Jennifer
well,
B.
I would ask you about this, Jayar. The Champagne Wishes says you need to blame the tech bros. I don't know about blaming the tech bros, but I do have a question about the tech bros. They all jumped on the Trump train pretty early. I'm going to say a couple of years into the 4-year Biden run, maybe 2.5 years in. You saw people like David Sachs jump on. Those guys do the All In podcast. I know, I've known them for years. I used to play cards with them. I had no idea that they were these kinds of that they wouldn't speak truth to power. It was remarkable to me, and I see it as self-enrichment. Is that too shallow a way to look at it? I mean, it seems to me that they have a lot to gain just from a self-enrichment standpoint by playing with.
Yo, listen, everyone talks about how much we love capitalism. There's a level of capitalism. There's unfettered capitalism, and there's completely unregulated capitalism where people can then start taking advantage of other humans, and we cross over into humanitarian issues or not caring about other people's lives for the sake of getting that extra dollar. Look, we talked about that, not we, you and I, but everyone was talking about that United Healthcare CEO, and his objective is to make money. So is that company. So people dying, who cares? Who cares? I'm trying to make money. That's capitalism. So the same way capitalism forces people like him to not care about anything but putting in policies that make sure they make more money, and who cares about other people's lives and their health and their doctor visits. The same way people think politics is a way for me to benefit in this capitalistic society, and nobody's regulating it. No one cares how much I change my mind or what what principles I claim to have at first. Look at Zuckerberg. Came straight out as soon as the election was over, talking about how he's completely changing the way that the platform sees truth, the way that they see fact checking. We're going to pull back on the fact checking because now the guy who doesn't deal in facts is in power. And if he's in power and he's targeting me, I can't make more money. It's all based on making more money. They say it blatantly. They just don't say it directly. They just say it with one level back. We're going to change it because that's not a good business model. A business model is money making. So yeah, the tech bros jumping on, they start seeing it as, so and it's always been that way before Trump. Politicians that'll come and appeal to business leaders are basically telling them, I mean, if you fund my campaign or help benefit me in some kind of way, I'm going to help benefit you. And the only thing business leaders care about benefiting themselves with is making money.
That is just perfectly described, because there is a quid pro quo, and we saw, I'll just use David Sachs again as an example. I mean, he's big. He's a PayPal founder, for those who don't know, et cetera. He did Yammer too, but he's a very smart guy, and he's been an innovator in the tech space as a tech entrepreneur. Okay, as a venture cap kind of guy. But he was against crypto. He thought crypto was a scam. Now he's in the government, head of crypto. I mean, it's crazy. That's how completely transactional the whole thing is. And then you mentioned Zuckerberg. To me, it was comical. I mean, you get rid of the fact checkers, as you say, because you've got this guy who doesn't like to be fact checked and doesn't want anything on any of his posts or any of his remarks to be fact checked, gone through any fact check filter in Trump. So he gets rid of that. And then he goes on Rogan with this kind of makeover that he's done on himself and says that we need a little more masculine energy. Since the whole election was full of masculine energy, even the women who are part of Trump's world are, they're gun-toting, ass-kicking women. It's that Marjorie Taylor Greene kind of brand, Kristi Noem, who runs now DHS, she has that brand. So you saw that change with Zuckerberg.
Wait, Zuckerberg went on talking about manliness? I missed this. Did he really? Are you messing with me, bro?
No, are you serious? You didn't see it? It was on Joe Rogan.
I did not see Zuckerberg talking about being manly. No, I did not.
He said America could use a little more masculinity and kind of a masculine and forward kind of policy.
I generally try to avoid the conversations about who's
Tony will try to. Tony might be able to find it for you in a hurry. But yeah, it was extraordinary to me because, as you say, it was so clearly transactional. But. Tell me about the watch list, Jayar Jackson.
Watch list a little bit more. Yeah. Daily, we post 2 to 3 videos a day. We'll do breakdowns, 8 minutes, sometimes 7, sometimes 12. I just posted one, or I just sent it over to our guys to post that took on all this stuff that's lately since the election, it's been trying to react to some of the stuff that's happening with these executive orders and this declaration and that, seeing which ones actually make sense as far as what we need to pay attention to versus the ones where he's just trying to condition the community and society to accept whatever it else is that they may be doing. So it's every day it's video based, because when I first came in with the Young Turks, I kind of settled into being that guy who finds those moments that we refer back to because we witnessed it and people tend to forget it. Again, this is W. Bush administration days, to reference the things that they said and did. And maybe people aren't always throwing the video back in their face. Again, there's technology had changed. We're on the internet now, back in 2005. And so since that was like my lane, that was always something that I did. So I produce and write and shoot these videos where I'll tell the story, but you don't have to just listen and believe me. You're not going to see my floating head behind, like, those TikTok videos.
Yeah, I do. I know that.
The script is behind, not the script, but this news story they're talking about. And you're like, look at this.
Yeah, that's wild.
So I just run it with the videos.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. It does play to your strength, which is you just find stuff, which is why I'm amazed you couldn't find the Zuckerberg, the Zuckerberg thing. You got to go.
I'm so
find
disappointed in myself.
Oh my God, it's so it's so clear.
After this,
let me just hit a couple of comments before we say goodbye to Jayar. Having Jayar Jackson and Mark Thompson together today is like having my coffee with a croissant. Wow. Citizen Morgan, thank you for that. Shonda says Curtis Yarvin, look into him. It's who J.D. Vance is who J.D. Vance has a lot to do with. Here's what's happening. He is associated with Dark Enlightenment and neo-reactionary movement, which critiques. I know all about Curtis Yarvin. Curtis Yarvin is a monarchist. Curtis Yarvin is a guy who believes that America should have a CEO. Okay, and that. Monarchism is what's feeding into a lot of the Project 2025 power, and also those who are around Trump are big devotees of Curtis Yarvin, including Musk. Well, you might imagine. I mean, he's the most powerful CEO on earth, so he loves an idea that comes out of it. We need a CEO. Yarvin's thing is, JR, I know you know this, but just to everybody, Yarvin's thing is, hey, if you look at Apple, when they want to put together an iPhone, they get their design people together, they get their technical people together, they get the engineers together, they say, we want an iPhone and we want a prototype by June, blah, 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 and they have it. 18 months later, you actually have a phone in your hand. If you were to ask the government to build an iPhone, 18 months later, you'd be having another committee to talk about the design decisions that still needed to be made, and there'd be a waste of money, et cetera. Yeah, but we're not building iPhones with the U.S. government. We're handling nuanced, complex issues that affect people worldwide. And this is the problem with the tech bros. We've seen them do it already. Musk comes in and just wants to decapitate the government. You can't do that. There are too many sensitive programs. We've seen it. Regulatory agencies from the USDA, the FAA, the Food and Drug Administration, the NIH, and CDC, critical with an emerging pandemic, arguably, with the next bird flu beginning to actually transfer species. I mean, this is an odd time to decapitate government. So I get it. Government can be overblown, and government can be lumbering. But the idea somehow that you need a CEO like a Elon Musk type, that's Yarvin's basic vibe. And I just think you're seeing already how it's an awful idea.
Yeah, and we've been taught since birth that the American dream is to be the richest person ever. That's the only objective. And now everyone doesn't buy into it, but that's the strong energy that's pushed on us. So, of course, people who have that, we don't care how they got there. We just go, look, he got there. He must be. We make assumptions about who they are and how they got there, and their genius to get to that point. And many of them use
in a sense, we're royalists, aren't we? It's just that it's money that we consider the royalty. That's so true. Ryan says this, with a $20 euro. Isn't that a euro? Yeah. Question, doesn't POTUS have latitude over discretionary spending and how those monies are spent, since the heads of those agencies have discretion and he appointed them? Well, it depends what agency you're talking about, but generally speaking, POTUS doesn't have latitude it depends what you're also talking about discretionary spending. But when a program is funded, it's funded by Congress, and that's a formal appropriations process. That money has to be spent by that agency. And POTUS can't come in and go, I want to divert some of the money. I don't want you to spend as much money on immigrants. I want you to spend more money on the border and not immigrants who are in this country already, et cetera. You can't, he doesn't have, in this case, it's a he, POTUS doesn't have that power, no.
It's taking powers from Congress.
Yeah, but so are you in any way encouraged? I mean, the courts have stepped in, but basically this crew that says, F you, we'll do what we want, we know what the people want, and we'll continue to do it. I mean, they are already in violation of a court order, as we were saying. Are you at all optimistic about how we can come out of this, how the people might be able to push back, or is it going to be a dark time for a while?
I think, I mean, especially since we're seeing which lines they're willing to cross. You know, he tests. And then once he tests, then he's like, well, okay, we'll go ahead and push. And he's crossed many. So as of now that we've gotten, I mean, it was the easiest line across is Congress, because those folks are, again, as I was pointing out, they kowtowed to him because they're like, this is power. You know, I need to be near it. So they folded immediately and gave up their powers. If we start crossing the judicial branch, which of course he's already gone after, and he feels he's appointed loyalists enough in that aspect to get anything that he wants, that's when we'll find out exactly if other countries, you know, we see France, we see people bust out into protests and riots, and they work. And whenever protests or riots happen here, it's, you know, it's considered completely like negative. Nothing about, even though this country's based off of a bunch of people protesting and rioting and fighting for independence, right? Even though they didn't give it to everybody. But still, that's the basis. That's what we like to brag about. But I think until we've gotten to the point where enough people are affected by it, because how big is this country? Enough people are affected by it, then we may see that energy. I think that's kind of the only way left. However else this guy can be stopped, it's going to have to be either some folks that he's unexpectedly didn't think would stop him, which happened his first term. That's why he was so frustrated by it. So whoever is left that could stop him has to be some what he thought were like-minded people. Maybe people with the on the Supreme Court, maybe folks in other levels of judiciary, appointed people. There's Republicans that were appointed by Donald Trump himself, by Reagan, by Bush, who have stopped and blocked some of these moves that he's making. That's kind of the last rail. If we see that happen, and enough people then are affected by these cuts and this stealing of people's money and limitations of their taxes and all their rights, eventually it's going to be bad enough before then we get to that point. I think our last rail is that kind of fight, and that's when it is dark to me. Nobody wants to see a bunch of fighting, but you know, the people in the ivory towers don't care. The moats and walls are being built right now.
Right.
I know it sounds really over the top, but listen.
No. But I mean, I think it's true that they're insulated on some level. It has to be a protest, a series of protests. The people's voice has to be heard. It's not being heard through their congressional representatives because, as you say, they've been cowed. Tony, one thing I wanted to play for Jayar before we say goodbye is that back and forth on CNN that was about the. There you go, you've got it. Because this is about sort of flipping the bird to the judiciary. Again, this is the J.D. Vance saying, you know, this judge is overstepped because Trump's authority should be taking the priority over the judge's authority. Go ahead, if you would, please, Tony.
But let me just understand where you stand. If a district court judge rules in a way that the president dislikes, should the president listen or should the president defy?
If a district court judge tries to usurp the authority of the chief executive of this country, he should absolutely defy it. There's a difference between broad policy decisions and discrete disputes between parties. That's the difference. If I want a policy decided, I'll take it to the Supreme Court.
What about checks and balances?
Well, Scott, you're all about
of a district court judge who elected them.
What I can't get with is you talk.
Yeah. So who elected them? That's the way we do it. It's not an elected position. It's an appointment. That's why your guy, Trump, that guy, Scott Jennings, comes out of the Bush administration. That's why your guy, Trump, has a lot of power because he can appoint those judges. And so it may be a flaw, but it's a law. So that's the way it works. But it's interesting that they are now viewing the courts as sort of a situational advantage or impediment, depending on what they want.
And again, that was in the first term. He started hacking judges that didn't do or say what he wanted. So that was the first shot at him. And he tried to normalize it. And, people pushed back. He had those, I think it was Chris Cuomo when he was on CNN. He had that back and forth with him about, I don't want to say the judge's name in case I have the wrong one, but it was a Latino judge. And he says, look at him. He's Latino. He didn't even say Latino because he doesn't have respect to it. He just said he's Mexican or something.
Yeah.
And
Hispanic,
why would he?
Yeah.
Why would he not? And so that he normalized that, of course, he's Hispanic. So therefore, he's going to rule against me because I'm white. And it's all based in racial lines. But if someone says, yo, I think you're kind of coming after minorities and people that have been oppressed this whole time, they go, why are you always bringing up race? I'm only having the same conversation you're having, bro.
So the watch list you can pick up right here on YouTube if you are here on this platform, taking us in that way. And does it also exist on audio platforms?
Yeah, listen. Watch list is on YouTube. It's on Facebook. It's on Snapchat. Apparently, it's doing pretty good on Snapchat as well. I don't venture to Snapchat much anymore, but it's doing well over there as well. Like for my own fun purposes. But I'm not sure if you know this, Mark Thompson. I talk politics all the time. It's depressing. It makes me tired. It makes me have a bleak outlook on the world. But you know what? I watch NBA every night. I checked out the Super Bowl too. You know what? I'd like to look at society and the fun things that happen. Nate Robinson, former NBA player, was gonna die because he had kidney issues, and some fan or someone they donated him their kidney, and he posted that picture on Instagram, and it actually touched my heart, man.
That is a great story. And it's funny now that you mention it. I have to look at all the people who participate in our community here as potential organ donors for me. Yes, that's exactly right. When I need an organ, I have to look at the community. That's what I get from the Nate Robinson story. You get some heartwarming story, but I get how it could benefit Mark Thompson. That's what I get.
We're living in Donald Trump's world now.
Yeah, exactly.
So like stuff like that, I want to talk about more. So just really fast. Yeah. Also on YouTube is Jayar Rated. That's where I get to talk a little less about hardcore, depressing politics and some of the things that I think inspire me or just fun or an outlook on our society in general. Because there's so many things happening outside of it that I think tons of people pay attention to, but also it may not always be as important or life-changing as what's happening in our political spectrum right now. So check me out also there, JR Rated.
JR Rating?
JR Rated. They
Rated.
We started slapping that up there every time I was doing a video.
JR Rated. I like it.
Check it out on YouTube, you guys.
Watch list and JR Rated. Come back and see us. And JR is JAYAR for those who are just there. It is. Tony's got it up.
You guys can find it. There's my little cartoon version of me.
Yeah. Very kind of studly cartoon version of you. I like it.
The artist gave me a serious chin.
Did you reject a couple of those artist conceptions and go make my chin bigger or anything like that?
Considering the artist was a fan of the show and did like 6 different versions for free, I had no complaints.
Well, it looks good. JR Rated and of course the watch list. Love that you hung out a little bit with us today, and I look forward to
listen, Mark. I would love to do it like once a month, if not every couple of weeks, brother.
I love it. Now we put you in for a monthly. I love that. Thanks, JR Jackson.
Thanks, you guys. Good to see you, man.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.